Welcome to the first biology lecture, so we can kind of keep moving forward. We're going to go through chapter 1, which should just be a review, so this will be quick, and I would encourage you to only write down those things that you maybe need to jog your memory for, because I'm hoping this is stuff that you guys already know. One of my favorite things is the book you guys have has like an owl on the front. He always looks like he's doing a magic trick, but he's a snowy owl, and they have adaptations for life and barren habitat. So their feathers provide insulation so they can stay warm in sub-zero temperature, and they have really, really awesome vision and acute hearing because they're trying to locate prey. These are always predators. So snowy owls are the results of evolution, the process that has transformed life from its earliest beginnings. So there he is. This is one of his cuter pictures. Like, he's so cute. The glamour shot. Those are like from the 90s. That's telling my age on that one. Anyways, we probably want some essential questions. So we'll go with, what are the themes of biology? Because we want to review these things, get the basic themes, what things we're going to kind of see as we move forward. But the other thing that we're going to want to, and we won't really get it much from this lecture, partly because I'm going to skip through it because we're going to do a lot of exploring with it in the next block. So just be ready for that. But our other essential question is, how do we form an experiment? I was a researcher, so experimenting and setting up experiments was a big thing of it. And that's a big thing in any science, is to how do we write out an experiment. So keep those things in mind as we move towards the next class. All right, so biology is the scientific study of life. Bio is life. Ology is study. So it's a very simple thing with our root words. Properties of life include order, so a highly structured kind of thing, reproduction, the ability of organisms to reproduce their own kind, growth and development. So we have to grow and get bigger, but then also your cells do at the very basic level as well. So in the big sense and even in the tiny sense, things have to grow and develop. We also have to process energy. So some of them, I think some organisms like plants are going to use sunlight. We're going to be able to get ours from acquiring things and eating. There's some other organisms like these tube worms that take stuff like sulfuric mess that just comes out of deep sea thermal vents. They can make food out of it. Nutty. All right, regulation. So we've actually got to be able to regulate, and that's either internally, well, we've got to regulate the internal stuff, and that can either be behavioral like reptiles, or it can be internal like how we do. Kind of our bodies stay the same temperature all the time. All right. So response to the environment, we've got to respond to that environment. Even plants do, they don't move, but they have loads of other responses which are really fascinating. And then evolutionary adaptations. So we've got traits that evolve over generations, and we'll talk about that one a little bit more as we move forward. Oh, I love to leave the seahorses in here. We'll have to talk about these guys later because I know it won't play from this recording, but remind me about the pygmy seahorses. They are always worth a look. Okay? So some things to kind of look at, again, is another way to see it. There's order. There's reproduction, okay? And we think of reproduction in the organismal sense as organisms make kind of new organisms to perpetuate the species, but even cells, we'll talk about cellular reproduction, all kinds of things like that. So small level, large level. Same with growth and development. Energy processing is eating and processing stuff. Regulation, response to our environment, and evolutionary adaptation. This one's really good because this is the Venus flytrap responding to an insect to eat. Okay, hopefully we know this one already, but it's the biological organization, and we'll kind of make some examples of this a little bit later, but biological organization unfolds as it follows. So we've got a biosphere, again, life and sphere, so it's kind of a ball of life. An ecosystem, that's all the organisms in a particular area and the physical components. So it's what we call abiotic factors. So it also includes non-living factors. Yeah, doing this lecture makes me realize that I really need to clean this computer screen as I write on it. All right, a community is just going to be the array of organisms living in a particular ecosystem. Again, I'm not going to give you too many examples. I'm kind of giving you the definitions. You make sure you have something to go by here because we're going to make some kind of examples later. I'm going to stifle your creative thinking on those. Population, all the individuals of a species living in the specific area. Okay, then we have one single organism. It's the one thing. It can be all the way from one bacterium all the way up to one big elephant. Just the one living thing. Okay. We've got organ systems. So hopefully you know of some of these, like maybe it's the cardiovascular system, maybe it's the urinary system, maybe it's the integumentary system, which is your skin. It's the organ system. An organ is a structure that composed of tissues. So cardiovascular, you might say your heart. I'm giving you examples on this one. You may not be as familiar. Tissue is a group of similar cells that perform a specific function. A little harder, but like in the heart, it has its own set of muscles. It's called cardiac muscle, and so that's a particular tissue. There's also blood vessels and things like that. So there's connective tissue. There's maybe some fatty tissue around the outside also. All of those are different types of tissues that are coming together to create this organ. Finally is the cell, which is our kind of basic fundamental unit of life. But it doesn't end there. We also will talk about organelles. This is going to end up being our unit 2. My brain is fried right now. It's our unit 2, where we're going to talk about cells. Okay, and so we'll go into their different organelles and how they function. Organelle literally means little organ. So cells have their own little organs that perform specific functions. They all do. Then we go all the way down to the molecule, a cluster of chemical units. We better know one more, which I don't think is listed here, but you've all taken chemistry. What makes up a molecule? An atom. So all the way down to the atoms. It's never listed there, but think about that one. You know your chemistry. So even though I don't provide you with an example here, they do give you one here to look through. So you see the biosphere, you see an ecosystem of the Florida Everglades. We're going to come up with different examples. Okay, community is maybe the plants, the heron, the alligators. We'll take our population of alligators, a single alligator. Its organ system is its nervous system, then its brain, then its nervous tissue, then a cell, a nerve cell, an organelle, like one particular nucleus, the part of it, and then the DNA, that molecule that makes it up, plus our little atom. Okay? All right, we'll talk a little bit about this, but really this will come up more when we do evolution, which is actually second semester. But emergent properties are just new properties that arise at each step upward in the hierarchy of life, from the arrangement and interactions among component parts. So new properties that arise. So one of the things that fascinates me, if you've looked at videos, there's heart cells, and they would show them kind of beating, and they'd put them next to each other and they'd start to kind of beat in conjunction. So these things have new properties that arise at each step up in that hierarchy of life. So different interactions, including the abiotic factors that are there, those are properties that emerge within that group together. So we'll see that more with evolution and more with ecology second semester. All right, so cells are at the level of which properties of life emerge. So the first kind of life properties emerge at the cellular level. These are really important things that a cell can do. So a cell can regulate its internal environment. That's why it's got a little boundary on it. Okay, it can take in and use energy. So it's either going to eat or it's going to take in sunlight. It will respond to its environment. We've got cool things with adaptation. Sometimes there's tails on these things, sometimes there's little hairs, so sometimes they get a tail, helps it wiggle around, sometimes there are hairs, which help do other things. It's lots of stuff. They can develop and maintain, and an unexpected guest there in the room. That's always funny on the editing parts, because I don't think you guys realize all that stuff happens, but it happens to me, so I'll make commentary on what's going on. But anyway, cells also develop and maintain a complex organization, and they give rise to new cells, so that's that cellular reproduction part. All cells are enclosed by a membrane, so there's a little part on the outside that keeps them together, and it regulates the passage of materials between the cell and its surroundings. So it's kind of like some things can get through, and some things can't. I know I've got to clean this screen. Hopefully you see what I'm doing here, but some things are allowed in and some things aren't. We use DNA as the genetic information, and really all cells use that. I don't know if there might be, I don't want to say. Let's say that's what we know so far. There may be some exceptions that I can't remember. So here's another thing I like to do, because I know that we take in a lot of information at a time, but that's been 10 minutes. So at around the 10-minute mark each time, I like to remind you guys to maybe take a break or to take a look back at your notes, make sure you understand things, take a potty break or, a snack break or take a nap. I don't know, do whatever you do, but I encourage you to take this in kind of 10-minute kind of sections, so that way it still feels fresh. Because the longer you do it, the tougher it might be. So that's my encouragement, but you do what you do. I'll just keep talking. Okay. So there are two basic forms of cells. There's some prokaryotes and some eukaryotes. We will talk about these more in detail whenever we get to those sections, but prokaryotes are really the older ones and they're simpler. That's all we need to know. Eukaryotes, though, are the ones we find for plants, animals, fungi, and these cool things called protists. These are the ones with our little organs, our organelles in them. Okay? So that's the distinction to think of now. We will spend more time kind of teasing those apart and looking at kind of how they're different and the same. So that's to start with. Prokaryotic is simpler, okay, except with an I in it. There we go. And eukaryotes are more complex and what we would see in plants and animals and things like that. All right. So you can see a prokaryotic cell is this little tiny guy here, and a eukaryotic cell is also much bigger. But we'll talk about that in great detail. So if you don't have all of it, don't worry about it. Cells illustrate another theme in biology. So there's a structure and function relationship. That's going to be a big one that we look through over time, is that structure and function are always related. So we've got the opposable thumb. That's always a good one. So you can kind of hold up your hand and look at your opposable thumb. So that's a function of grasping that gives you the opportunity to grasp things, tree limbs, whatever. I think more like chimpanzee type things, like tree limbs and things like that. But if you look at your opposable thumbs, it has a particular structure, and it's related to that function of grasping. Your feet are made in a particular way to help with the function of walking. Okay, your arms are for flailing. I don't know, whatever you use them for. All right. So the structure and function are always related, and that's at every stage, all the way from kind of molecules all the way up to the biosphere. The function is reflected by its structure. Okay. Living organisms interact with their environments, and they include other organisms and physical factors. Okay, so basically those non-living kind of factors, wind, water, air, oxygen, think of those things. In most ecosystems, plants are the producers that provide the food. Consumers consume it and eat it, and those animals. Then we have decomposers that are recyclers. Usually that's like fungi and some bacteria. Can be some other things too, but those are kind of our things in the ecosystems. The dynamics of ecosystems include two major processes, so recycling of chemical nutrients and one-way flow of energy. This one we'll actually talk about this semester, so this will be a very short section that we have on cell processes. I'm going to write PROC for short, but that's going to be our tiny little unit 3. Okay, so we'll talk about this flow of energy and how that stuff works. Recycling of nutrients will be next semester, just so you know where we're going with these things. That's our kind of ecology thing. It's talking about chemical cycling. All right, so you can kind of take a look at that. Hopefully that's something that you've seen. Sunlight goes into the plants, the producer, this moose would eat it. At some point, energy would leave it, but chemicals like carbon are recycled. Okay. All right, evolution is a core theme of biology. We'll be pretty quick on this one. We'll talk about this more at the start of next semester. So all cells have DNA, and that's the chemical substance of genes. Genes are these kind of units of inheritance, and they transmit information. They're grouped in these really long segments of DNA, and when DNA kind of comes together, it'll be a chromosome. Again, this part, though, will be our Unit 4. I don't know what just happened there, but we will get to talk about genes in much more detail. But if you just know that they're the unit of inheritance, that's a great start. Okay? So a species' genes are coded with a sequence of 4 kinds of building blocks making up the double helix. So all forms of life use essentially the same code to translate information stored in DNA into proteins. This whole thing will go from DNA to proteins. Again, that's another thing we'll cover this semester in the genetics section. So this is going to be our Unit 4, our genetics. So again, if you don't quite have it here, that's not that big of a deal. We're just introducing all these things that go into biology that hopefully you've at least heard of before. So in the cell, in the nucleus, there is going to be DNA, and it makes up this double helix. So basically there is one strand, and then this one is a separate strand, so that's 2 strands. So because it has 2 strands, they call it a double. And because it's helixed, or it's like curly, that's a helix. So that's where we get the double helix, because there are 2 parts, and they helix or they curl around each other. Okay? So the entire library of genetic information, or genetic instructions that an organism inherits, is called a genome. So that's all the DNA that one contains. Okay, that's all of the little, let's see, let me go back, see if I can go back. That's all of this little chain that you see here, all of this stuff for your whole organism, like all of the DNA that would be in you. All right, in recent years, we've tried to determine the entire sequence of nucleotides in humans, and so that was called the Human Genome Project. So that's a thing. The Human Genome Project. You can take a look at it. It's really interesting. It's not my field of expertise per se, but it is a really interesting thing, and there's a lot of things that we're attempting to kind of genome all of the sequence, and so you learn that, and that's helpful for different biological studies. Like I did research on some plant mutations, so it was really helpful to have those plants' entire genomes mapped out. All right, so we can think of biology's enormous scope as having 2 dimensions. There's a vertical dimension, as in the size and scale that stretches from molecules to biosphere, the stuff we looked at a minute ago. But there's also this horizontal dimension that spans across the great diversity of organisms. So not only do we go from molecules to biosphere, but in there's just this vast array of species. So the diversity of species on the planet is incredible. Diversity is the hallmark of life, so this is kind of the big deal. We've identified maybe about 1.8 million species, but it's estimated that there could be anywhere between 10 and 100 million. Just crazy stuff. Like the tropics is notoriously difficult to figure out what species are there. Taxonomy is a branch of biology that names species and classifies them. This we're going to talk about next semester as well, so we'll talk about how we classify things. Okay, this is a big one probably for this section that we will at least somewhat discuss, but the diversity of life can be arranged into 3 higher levels called domains. So if you remember, there's that whole thing with the, let me see if I can write this, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, the whole King Philip came over for great spaghetti or whatever it is, something like that. There's actually a thing before that. So it is domains. And so the 3 domains of life consist of bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So bacteria is the most diverse. Archaea, these prokaryotes that are really old that tend to live in really extreme environments. There's not a place they can't live. And then eukarya are our eukaryotic cells. So they have a nucleus, and those are plants, animals, and fungi. Let's see. Okay, so there's bacteria, there's archaea. Hard to kind of differentiate those. There are ways, but just know that that's what they are. And then our domain of eukarya includes protist, plantae, fungi, and animalia. So again, we've got these, and these are our different kingdoms. Okay. The kingdom, it used to be kingdom protista, but now they realized it's a lot of things happening in the protists, which we'll get to that second semester as well. All right, so evolution can be defined as a process. Did we make it to 20? We did make it to 20 minutes. Okay, take a break real quick, pause the video, do a few other things, and then come back. All right, so we're going to kind of wrap it up, though, also, because some of this we can get when we see each other next time, and some of this won't really describe all the things that we need to do. But nonetheless, evolution can be defined as a process that has transformed life on Earth from its earliest beginnings to the diversity of organisms living today. So the fossil record documents that life has been evolving on Earth for billions of years, and there's a pattern of ancestry. So part of what backs up evolution is the fossil record. Not to mention, in recent past, certain things have developed, like MRSA, that didn't exist back in the day. So that tells us that evolution is happening, and evolution is just things changing over time. Okay, but there's our fossil record. Charles Darwin helped us give this. He never said evolution. He only kind of wrote on what he saw was the origin of species by means of natural selection. Okay, on the origin, excuse me. So he just kind of read a collective essay, though there were a couple others than Charles Lyell that was doing the same thing at the time. So there was a lot of thought process about how this was happening. Natural selection is our proposed mechanism for evolution, and when we get there, we'll discuss it in greater detail. Let me see. Things don't want to work anymore. Okay, so there's Darwin. And there's different kind of a variety. So those are birds, and we suspect that maybe there was a common ancestor at a certain point in time, but we've got different diversities based on natural selection. I'm not going to worry too much about these. These are things that we'll cover a lot in the future. You can read through them if they're interesting to you, but this is a lot like if you've seen the peppered moth experiment. So just to kind of get your mind in the right spot, but I'll remind you later. So peppered moth is a good example of what goes on with evolution, that if they're maybe more visible to a predator, then perhaps that predator eats them, and then that changes their population. Notice there used to be some lightly colored ones, and now they're a little bit darker. That's a change in the population. That's evolution. Simple, simple. That's about all I want to get with that one. So, but there's also some really cool evidence that you could see, like if we went back to kind of mammoth, from the mammoth to our modern elephant, how there's these kind of small changes that happened over time, and that gives us another indication of that. So the process of science, just to keep this video a little bit shorter, I'm going to leave them in here. I'm just going to kind of skip through them. There's some really important stuff, but we're going to explore these things together in our next class. So these things are there for you. Things not happening. But they're there for you to take a look at, but we're going to work through the controlled experiment a little bit later on. So you have that information available to you. You can read through it on the lecture notes tab of the live binder, but I really don't want to get into it right this second. We'll have lots of time, and it's a good thing to do for biology. Okay, so everyday life in biology. We do have artificial selection. So some of the things that are proposed of natural selection is how we're actually able to produce crops and livestock and a variety of pets. I got 2 crazy dogs, and that's always something. Okay. Humans have unintentionally caused the evolution of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which is something that's highly, definitely a big thing that we need to work on. Pesticide-resistant pests, and then habitat loss and global climate change. It's maybe not entirely humans' fault, but there is a lot to do with it and what we've done that maybe is part of the reason that the climate is such that we have ice caps melting, and we have greater water levels and maybe warmer ocean temperatures and Gulf temperatures than we've had in a long time. And that creates a lot of interesting weather patterns, which we're seeing. All right. Many issues facing society are related to biology and involving expanding technologies. The basic goals of science and technology differ. The main goal of science is just to understand natural phenomena. This is where I fit. Just one of those that I like to understand how it works. Technology is how to apply that for a specific purpose. I can use technology, but hasn't necessarily been the basis of me is to try to create new technologies. But you get the point. The difference is technology is for application, science basic understanding. So although the goals differ, science and technology are needed. We do need advancements of technology in order to make things easier, make science go quicker. I know I was on the crux of having a new protocol and making new things happen as the technology improved right as I left doing that research to come be a teacher. So even those things are a part of it. They keep each other going. Technologies of DNA manipulation are the result of scientific discovery in the structure of DNA. This is a cool thing that we'll get to talk about, so we'll spend some time working through GMOs. We'll have a project. It's good stuff. Okay, with that, that's the end of this one, so I'm trying to keep it a little shorter for you, but if you do have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. As always, I won't always write it, but this is our first one. This is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. It goes straight to my phone, and so I can try to respond to you pretty quickly. So kellycroyce@gmail.com is the best way to go. We just talked about it on the syllabus, but still, just a reminder, if you do have questions over this particular material, this is the best way to get a hold of me. Okay? And so with that, I hope you get through that and it works out for you. If you have any questions, again, let me know, and we will work through experiments next time. Have a good one.